It's disheartening, isn't it? That feeling of bewilderment when a connection that seemed promising suddenly cools after physical intimacy. You met someone, the rapport was evident, conversations flowed easily, and there was a mutual sense of pursuit. Interest was shown, and you felt a genuine spark. Yet following a physical encounter, the dynamic shifts. Texts become infrequent, plans cease to materialize, and the initial warmth dissipates, leaving you with a lingering question: why did his interest wane after we were intimate? If you find yourself replaying moments, wondering if you acted too quickly, revealed too much, or were overly available, know that your feelings are valid. It's natural to question whether the connection you perceived was merely a facade to fulfill a physical desire. It's also important to acknowledge that desire for a meaningful relationship, one that transcends fleeting attention. The hope for a genuine bond is inherent, and it's understandable to feel disheartened when physical intimacy seems to lead to detachment. Let me assure you, experiencing these feelings does not make you irrational or overly sensitive. Your desire for profound connection and mutual respect is not a flaw, it's a strength. Today, we will explore the underlying reasons why some men withdraw after physical intimacy, and more importantly, how to safeguard yourself from mistaking physical attraction for genuine love. This isn't about discouraging intimacy, but about empowering you to approach it with discernment, recognizing its sacred value rather than using it as a means to secure someone's commitment. Gaining insight into this dynamic will shift your perspective. Instead of dwelling on why did he disappear, you'll recognize it as a fortunate revelation, preventing deeper emotional involvement with someone unsuited for a meaningful connection. So, let's delve into the intricacies of this phenomenon and explore how you can maintain your strength, allure, and emotional well-being throughout your romantic journey. One fundamental aspect to grasp is the role of pursuit in initial attraction for many men. This isn't to perpetuate cliches, but to understand the underlying psychology. When a man encounters someone he finds appealing, an element of intrigue is often present. He wonders, who is she? Can I impress her? Does she reciprocate my interest? This uncertainty generates a particular energy, activating a primal drive to pursue. Crucially, this effort he invests is what cultivates emotional investment. The time and energy dedicated to knowing you, sharing experiences, and earning your trust contribute to the value he places on the developing connection. It's not solely about achieving a goal, but about building something significant. However, when physical intimacy occurs prematurely, before this emotional foundation is solid, it can disrupt this natural progression. Consider the analogy of watching a film and skipping to the final scene early on. The impact is lost because the narrative buildup, the rising tension, the character development, all the elements that lend meaning to the conclusion are absent. Similarly, in relationships, if a man hasn't had the opportunity to explore your personality beyond the physical, your thoughts, values, and passions, an intimacy can become an isolated event rather than a unifying experience. While he might enjoy the moment, it doesn't necessarily foster a deeper bond. When the element of mystery, which might have been the primary driver of his attention, in the absence of a compelling emotional narrative, is gone, his interest may wane. This isn't to suggest that men are solely driven by the chase, or that physical intimacy should be indefinitely postponed. Rather, it highlights the significance of timing. When intimacy precedes a genuine connection, it risks becoming just another experience, not the inception of something profound. If a man wasn't genuinely invested in you beforehand, it's unlikely that physical intimacy alone will suddenly create that investment. In fact, he might perceive the encounter as the culmination, the end of the pursuit, and mentally move on to the next potential connection. This underscores the importance of aligning emotional and physical intimacy. Allow the connection to develop gradually. Let there be anticipation. Allow him to make an effort. When he isn't certain of your level of interest, when he needs to consistently engage to earn your trust, it reveals his true character. Some men will indeed fade away, and that's valuable information. But those who persist, he continue to show interest, even without immediate physical rewards, are the individuals worthy of your attention. When physical intimacy does occur within this context, it won't diminish his interest. It will deepen it, because his attraction will be rooted in who you are as a person, not just your physical being. Physical intimacy can create a temporary illusion of closeness, but it doesn't automatically equate to commitment. This is a crucial distinction in contemporary dating. Intimacy, particularly physical intimacy, is powerful. It engages our most vulnerable and fundamental selves. It's more than just physical contact. It's an exchange of energy. In those moments, a profound and meaningful connection can feel palpable. Sometimes it is, but at other times, that perceived emotional closeness is simply the intensity of the experience itself. If a genuine emotional bond hasn't been established beforehand, the closeness you felt can dissipate unexpectedly quickly, leading to significant emotional distress. This is where considerable heartbreak can occur. While women often experience physical intimacy as something that fosters bonding, a sense of being seen and safe, some men may perceive it quite differently. For them, it might simply be a pleasurable experience, an exciting moment, or even a validation of their ego. They might not consciously intend to cause pain. In their perspective, they were attracted, they acted on their desire, and now, for various reasons, the emotional connection has faded. However, this doesn't diminish the impact on you, as your openness wasn't just physical. It involved emotional trust and hope. Now you're left questioning the connection that felt so real in the moment. The danger lies in mistaking that temporary illusion of closeness for genuine, sustainable love. It's easy to assume that intense passion indicates deep feelings. However, true connection isn't validated by momentary physical intensity, but by consistent behavior afterward. Have someone interacts with you the following day, the following week, when the initial excitement has subsided. Anyone can create a feeling of being wanted for a single night, but genuine interest manifests in consistent care and effort over time. This consistencia ogni becomes apparent when a relación tiene abierta de conversar orgánicamente, antes de la intimidad física, no solo durante o después. Therefore, emotional connection must take precedence. When you build a relationship gradually, steadily, and based on genuine compatibility, you create the space for intimacy to hold deeper meaning. It transitions from being merely a physical act to a reflection of mutual trust and respect. When a man has genuinely come to know you, your essence, your values, your boundaries, then intimacy becomes a deepening of an existing bond, not the conclusion of a pursuit. If you've ever wondered why something that felt so intimate could end with such emotional distance, the answer isn't that your feelings of closeness were invalid. It's that closeness without a solid emotional foundation is fragile. It might feel substantial but can easily crumble under pressure. The next time you connect with someone, consider whether the connection is built on more than just chemistry, or if chemistry is the sole driving force. When love is authentic, chemistry is just one component of a much more complex and profound equation. Your worth isn't diminished by being intimate. You only lose power when you disregard your own standards. This is a vital truth to internalize. Let's be honest, when a man withdraws after intimacy, it's easy to fall into self-blame. You might start questioning your actions, reevaluating every interaction. Did I become intimate too quickly? Did that decision ruin the possibility of a deeper connection? Society often conditions women to believe their value is tied to how long they wait to be physical. However, your inherent worth remains constant, regardless of when you choose to be intimate. What truly matters is the intention behind your decision, and whether you remain true to yourself or compromise your values to maintain someone's interest. When intimacy stems from mutual desire, clarity, and a genuine connection, it can be a beautiful experience even early in a relationship. But when it arises from fear of losing him, fear of not being enough, fear that he'll lose interest if you set boundaries, that's when it can be detrimental, not because of the act itself, but because of the internal conflict it creates. You might be silently betraying your own needs, thinking, I desire a slower pace, deeper emotional connection, but I'm overriding that because I believe this is what he wants. This is where the erosion of your power begins. You're operating on his timeline, not your own. You're not leading with confidence. You're seeking validation. A true key to being captivating isn't about playing games or adhering to arbitrary rules. It's about alignment. When your words, actions, and boundaries are congruent, you project a powerful message. I am self-aware. I know my desires, and I'm willing to wait for someone who recognizes and respects that. This self-assuredness is magnetic. It signals that you value yourself and won't offer intimacy as a mere transaction for attention. Consider this. The right partner won't be deterred by your setting healthy boundaries, and he won't leave simply because you are intimate. What a quality man values is your self-confidence and your commitment to your own standards. If you're willing to compromise your boundaries early on, it might suggest a pattern of compromising in other significant aspects of a relationship, emotionally, mentally, or even in the type of relationship you ultimately accept. Therefore, his withdrawal isn't a reflection of you being easy, it simply makes you human. Your true strength lies in learning from such experiences and honestly assessing your motivations. Did I engage in intimacy because I genuinely desired it, or out of fear of losing him? If it was the latter, view it as a signal to recalibrate, not to punish yourself. A woman who is grounded in her standards and leads with self-assurance doesn't chase love. She chooses it with wisdom, integrity, and self-respect. A man's emotional maturity dictates whether intimacy fosters closeness or creates distance. This is where many women experience disappointment, not due to any fault of their own, but because they overestimated the emotional readiness of the man they were connecting with. We often mistakenly assume that charm, attentiveness, and temporary affection equate to a desire for the same depth of connection we seek. However, charm is not synonymous with emotional maturity, and physical affection doesn't guarantee emotional availability. There are men who are adept at being present, romantic, and even vulnerable in brief periods. They might share personal stories, express their feelings, and articulate their aspirations, creating the illusion of a meaningful connection. Yet, the crucial distinction is that the ability to express emotion doesn't necessarily mean someone is emotionally available for a sustained and committed relationship. Some men can connect momentarily, but lack the capacity for sustained emotional engagement. They can be powerfully present when desire is intense and anticipation is high, but they lack the internal fortitude to maintain that presence once the initial excitement subsides. This often becomes apparent after physical intimacy. Physical closeness can amplify emotional intensity, creating a sense of accelerated intimacy. However, when a man lacks the emotional maturity to handle the implications of that intimacy, trust, vulnerability, commitment, he may feel overwhelmed afterward. It's not necessarily that he didn't enjoy the physical aspect, but that he was fundamentally unprepared for the emotional weight it could entail. As he begins to feel the pressure of "what now?" he tends to withdraw. This withdrawal isn't always a deliberate act of cruelty or manipulation. It often stems from a lack of emotional tools to continue engaging authentically. Consequently, instead of communicating his feelings honestly, he resorts to avoidance. He fades away. This is the painful juncture where his emotional immaturity translates into your heartbreak. You are left questioning your actions, meticulously analyzing past interactions to pinpoint where things went wrong. But the reality is, it had less to do with you giving too much and more to do with him lacking the capacity to give enough. He desired the peak of closeness without the accompanying responsibility of sustained emotional engagement. This disparity is not your fault. It's a fundamental incompatibility. Therefore, it's crucial not to allow physical connection to obscure your assessment of a man's emotional character. Consider his consistency over time. Does he actively listen when you express your needs? Does he respect your boundaries? Is he emotionally self-aware? Or does his engagement fluctuate based on what he's receiving from you? Physical intimacy doesn't magically transform someone into a committed partner. It merely amplifies their existing traits. If he was unreliable before, he'll likely become more so afterward. If he was inconsistent, he'll probably become more distant. However, if he was grounded, communicative, and genuinely invested, intimacy will likely strengthen your bond. The empowering aspect is that with emotional maturity, you can discern these crucial signs early on. You move beyond simply being swept away by how a man makes you feel in the moment, and instead pay close attention to his behavior. You observe whether his words align with his actions and whether his interest remains consistent, even without the expectation of immediate physical intimacy. Most importantly, You listen to your own intuition. You don't rush into intimacy out of fear of losing him. You wait to determine if he is truly someone worthy of your vulnerability. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about prioritizing your own emotional safety. A man with genuine emotional maturity doesn't disappear after physical intimacy. He doesn't engage in ghosting, breadcrumbing, or suddenly become unavailable. He remains present. He communicates openly. He seeks to deepen the connection, not just physically, but emotionally, because he views intimacy as something that strengthens the relationship, not as the culmination of a pursuit. If a man withdraws after being physically intimate, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's an indication of his lack of readiness. Therefore, view his withdrawal not as a sign that you gave too much, but as a revelation that he was unprepared to receive what you offered. Appreciate that you gained this understanding sooner rather than later. Your body is not something to regret. Your capacity for love is not something to be ashamed of. And your standards are your invaluable protectors against mistaking emotional immaturity for genuine, lasting connection. What often causes the deepest pain after intimacy is not the physical act itself, but the abrupt emotional distance that follows. One moment you are sharing profound closeness, whispers, touch, shared breath, and the next a stark silence descends. His responses become delayed, he seems preoccupied, and the intense warmth that was so palpable just hours or days before seems to dissipate. You are left staring at your phone, grappling with confusion. This emotional letdown is not only perplexing, but also deeply painful, because intimacy is intended to draw two individuals closer. When one person wasn't truly emotionally engaged from the outset, it becomes a one-sided experience. For the person who was emotionally present, this sudden detachment feels like a betrayal, even if it wasn't consciously intended. Men often underestimate the emotional impact of their withdrawal after intimacy. It's not merely disappointment. It's the feeling of vulnerability being exposed without reciprocation. Most women don't choose physical intimacy casually. It typically involves some degree of emotional connection, even if initially subtle. There's an underlying hope, a curiosity, a gentle opening of the heart. When that hope is met with silence, apathy, or detachment, the impact is profound. The situation can become even more complex because sometimes a man's withdrawal isn't malicious. He may have genuinely liked you, perhaps even felt something real. However, the moment physical intimacy occurs, it can trigger a realization within him that he isn't ready for the deeper implications: emotional intimacy, consistency, responsibility. Instead of acknowledging this and communicating honestly, he avoids, distracts, and moves on, hoping to sidestep the discomfort of explaining himself. This lack of emotional courage is not your failing. The real danger lies in internalizing his withdrawal as a reflection of your own value. This is where the true emotional wound occurs. You might begin to think, perhaps I shouldn't have been intimate. Maybe I scared him away. If I had waited longer, he might still be interested. But this places undue blame on yourself and gives him excessive credit. If a man's interest disappears after intimacy, it suggests that the initial attraction was either not strong enough or was based on a superficial perception rather than an appreciation of who you truly are. No amount of strategic waiting would have altered this outcome because the timing of intimacy wasn't the fundamental issue. His inability to value you afterward was. Here's a liberating truth. Intimacy does not diminish your worth. What truly empowers you is the intention behind your intimacy. When you are clear about your desires, when you prioritize genuine connection over fleeting chemistry, you protect your heart by observing consistent behavior, not just temporary displays of interest aimed at achieving physical closeness. If he withdraws after achieving physical intimacy, allow him to go. His departure doesn't signify a loss for you. It reveals his limitations. It indicates that he was incapable of meeting you on an equal emotional footing. While this realization may be painful, especially if you had envisioned a deeper connection, it is ultimately better to recognize incompatibility after intimacy than to lose yourself by clinging to someone who never intended to stay. Each time you walk away from someone who didn't value your body or your heart, You gain strength, elevate your standards, and become more attuned to the red flags in future interactions. Most importantly, you begin to understand that another person's inability to appreciate your worth does not diminish your inherent value. So, if you've ever experienced that emotional void following physical closeness, remember this: you haven't lost anything. You've gained valuable insight. You've learned that genuine connection is validated not by the intensity of initial attraction, but by how someone treats you after the initial spark. A man who truly values you will see intimacy as a moment that deepens your bond, not one that ends a pursuit. Until you encounter such a person, you are not missing out. You are simply moving closer to finding someone who is genuinely ready to see, cherish, and remain present in your life. Therefore, if you've ever felt confused, hurt, or questioned your worth after being physically intimate with someone, please know that you are not alone and you are not flawed. What occurred was not a reflection of your value, but an indication of their readiness or lack thereof. The more you understand this, the more empowered you become. You deserve a relationship where physical intimacy is not the pinnacle, but an integrated part of a deeper emotional connection. You deserve someone who appreciates your physical being, but more importantly, honors your heart, your mind, and your presence. Someone who stays, not because of what he gained physically, but because of who you are. The next time you are tempted to cue